Hello, happy believers. Welcome to the Good News, my own personal Bible study into the truth. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. John chapter 14, verse 6. So it is time to belt up and enjoy the ride as I discover His way, truth, and life. As the world seems to have nothing to offer anyone lately, only one bad disaster after another. And we crave for good news. So let's see what Jesus is offering us. In Psalm chapter 24, verse 1, it says, The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. Let us look at the parable of the workers in the vineyard. The kingdom of heaven is like this. Once there was a man who went out early in the morning to hire some workmen to work in his vineyard. He agreed to pay them the regular wage, a silver coin a day, and sent them to work in his vineyard. He went out again to the marketplace at 9 o'clock and saw some men standing there doing nothing. So he told them, You also go and work in the vineyard, and I will pay you a fair wage. So they went. Then at 12 o'clock and again at 3 o'clock, he did the same thing. It was nearly 5 o'clock when he went to the marketplace and saw some other men still standing there. Reflection. Okay, so early in the morning, a man hired some men who agreed on a wage, and they were happy to work for him in the vineyard for a silver coin a day. At 9 a.m., he hired other men, and they were in agreement also about the wage. Then at 12 noon, and at 3 p.m., he hired more men to work in his vineyard, and they agreed on the wage. Then at 5 p.m., he saw men who no one had hired, and they were hanging around all day, and they agreed to work for him also. All the workers were happy to work for the agreed wage. Because they were all hired at different times, no one knew what agreements the master made with them. And it did not seem to concern them. Everyone at this stage was happy with the master's work arrangements. We continue to read. When evening came, the owner told the foreman, Call the workers and pay them their wages, starting with those who were hired last and ending with those who were hired first. Reflection. The foreman was told to call the workers at the end of the day to pay them their wages. He was to pay the men he hired last first. I think this is unusual, as I would have thought he would have first paid the workers he hired first and sent them home. In paying the men he hired last, first, the workers who worked the full day would see they got paid the same wage even as the men who only worked 1 hour. This would upset them. We continue. The men who had begun to work at 5 o'clock were paid a silver coin each. So when the men who were the first to be hired came to be paid, they thought they would get more, but they too were given a silver coin each. They took the money and started grumbling against the employer. These men who were hired last worked only 1 hour, they said, while we put up with a whole day's work in the hot sun. Yet you paid them the same as you paid us. Listen, friend, the owner answered one of them. I have not cheated you. After all, you agreed to do a day's work for 1 silver coin. Now, take your pay and go home. I want to give this man who was hired last as much as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do as I wish with my own money? Or are you jealous because I am generous? And Jesus concluded, so those who are last will be first, and those who are first will be last. Reflection. I think this parable shows how the world's way of thinking and God's kingdom thinking is very different. The workmen were all very happy with their lot until they discovered that everyone got paid the same. It was then they started making comparisons and grumbling against their employer. They felt it was unfair, unjust. They assumed that the others would get paid less. They assumed they knew their employer. They assumed wrong. I think most of us would have thought the same way. We probably would not do another day's work for him. But God's kingdom thinking was different and had a very different perspective. Listen, friend, the owner answered one of them. I have not cheated you. After all, you agreed to do a day's work for 1 silver coin. Now, take your pay and go home. I want to give this man who was hired last as much as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do as I wish with my own money? Or are you jealous because I am generous? And Jesus concluded, so those who are last will be first, and those who are first will be last. The two perspectives are very different and clashing here. The master had every right to spend his money as he wished, as it was his money. His generosity was awesome. He was so generous that they could not grasp it as being fair. Another way of looking at this parable is that the master is in the place of God, the foreman is in the place of Jesus, and the workers are us. No matter what way you look at this parable, what stands out is the generosity of the master. It way surpasses our idea of generosity. It shows us how generous God is and how he wants to be so generous with everybody. Generous with his love, forgiveness, time, etc. We are all asked to repent during our lifetime. And no matter how soon or later in life we repent, we all receive the same amount of forgiveness. We are called to rejoice for each other, not to turn bitter or jealous because of God's generosity. God is also generous to us when it comes to receiving grace from Jesus. This grace helps us to understand his ways and to put them into practice. Thankfully, we receive grace from Jesus, so we understand that those who are last will be first, and those who are first will be last in his kingdom. Grace, so we will not become resentful or jealous, but rise above our human nature. In Romans chapter 12, verse 2, it says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. God's kingdom turns our world upside down. Next painting very, very soon. Watch this space. Until then, remember, God's generosity is awesome. Please like, subscribe and share so we can all live our wonderful Catholic faith together in all its richness.